What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who Classic review. Today we're going to be reviewing the 6th Doctor Colin Baker story, The Mark of the Rani. So this is the first episode that I'm reviewing this year, recently, where I've actually watched the episode and taken notes. So if you've been watching the videos recently and you're watching them in order on the playlist, you would know that the last 5 or so reviews that I've done were episodes that I watched quite a while ago, and I've kind of made the notes and the review after the fact, whereas this is the first one going forward now. We're doing it like we used to do it back in the day, back a year or so ago when we were doing these all the time, where I actually made notes while watching the episodes. So things should be somewhat back to the way it used to be. So The Mark of the Rani is an episode that I hadn't heard a whole lot about. I knew it was the first episode for the Rani. Of course, she also appears in Time in the Rani, the 7th Doctor story, which I have seen. But yeah, hadn't seen this one, hadn't heard a whole lot about it. It's not one that really gets talked about much. But yeah, let's have a look at the back of the DVD. This is The Mark of the Rani by Pip and Jane Baker. Drawn off course en route for Kew Gardens, the TARDIS materialises in the mining village of Killingworth in the early 19th century, and the Doctor and Peri find themselves in the midst of a Ludite rebellion. Why are peaceful men resorting to mindless violence, and why is the Master intent on sabotaging the Industrial Revolution? In order to safeguard Earth's future, the Doctor must defeat the combined forces of 2 rogue Time Lords from his own past. So that's the back of the DVD. It's a nice concept here of 2 rogue Time Lords. Of course, up until this point, it's really only been the Master that's kind of been the evil Time Lord, that the rogue Time Lord that we have come to know a lot throughout the classic series up until this point. But now we have the Rani, another rogue Time Lord, so very interesting having the both of them in this story, and of course the introduction to the Rani. So yeah, let's start off this one with the cast. First of all, Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor is pretty good here, actually. He's all right. He's not great. He definitely, acting wise, he does a very good job here. There's no denying that. Character wise, I'm still not the biggest fan. I think this is like his 4th or so story in this era, or in his era, and yeah, there's still moments of his character where he's a little bit too angry, a little bit too aggressive towards Peri especially. But I think he's acted very well by Colin Baker, and yeah, all in all, there's not too much I can fault about him, but we will get into that a little bit more later. We have, of course, got Peri. I haven't actually got the names of the actresses and actors up here, so sorry about that. But yeah, whoever the actress who plays Peri does a very good job here as well. All things considered, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Peri. I don't love the American accent, the put-on American accent, but she's fine enough here. I said very good. That's probably a bit of an over-exaggeration. I don't think she's very good. Peri's not my favourite, but yeah, she's fine. Then, of course, Anthony Ainley as the Master. He's fine here as well. Not one of his better performances in my personal opinion, but yeah, he's fine. And then, of course, you've got the Rani as well, who's pretty good here. More likeable, well, not likeable, I don't think that's the right word, but better in this story than she is in Time in the Rani, because she's way too silly in Time in the Rani. It's just the whole feel of that story, really. This is a much more serious story in a lot of ways, and the Rani is a much more serious character, and I do actually quite like her in this one, so yeah. Alright, let's get on to some points for this episode, starting off with the Doctor is still very aggressive and unlikable. So yeah, although I do like Colin Baker's acting and everything in this episode, I think he does a very good job in that regard, I still don't like the way the 6th Doctor is written. This is still very much the point where he's just grouchy at Peri all the time, really just doesn't, he just seems really rude and obnoxious and just not likable. I mean, you know, straight away when it's him and Peri in the TARDIS, he's having a go at her for stuff, and there's other times where he's also having a go at her, and it just seems like he's always having a go all the time. And you know, he has moments where he's a lot nicer, and he's, you know, he has some funny little moments, has a few puns in this episode as well, which I quite enjoy. But just generally, I don't know, he gets narky. I think that's the best word. He gets narky at Peri far too often, and it just comes off as a bit of a dick, to be honest. But yeah, that's just kind of what the 6th Doctor's like, especially at the start of his era. Men are suddenly becoming violent after a mark appears on their skin. So this is kind of the main thing of the story. These men from, was it Killingstone or whatever the place was called, Killingworth, they are, which I'm guessing it's like in Yorkshire, because everybody sounds very Yorkshire. I'm originally from Yorkshire, and yeah, everybody has a very strong accent, but a very strong northern accent at least. But yeah, they're basically getting these like red marks on their necks, these kind of dots, and yeah, it's pretty much causing them to be violent and hurting, not necessarily killing people, but hurting people and just being very rambunctious and violent, really. So that's kind of the main premise of it, and basically what it is, it ends up being that the Rani is actually giving them these like little maggot looking things which they swallow, and then that kind of, it's some like sleeping thing where basically it stops them from sleeping, so they don't sleep ever, and that gives them this red mark and then makes them violent and kind of follow her commands. A little bit strange, a little bit of a strange concept, but I mean, the Rani is kind of a scientist, kind of a chemist, sort of, in a way. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. The Master trying to team up with the Rani. So yeah, the Rani is, I don't know, I'd kind of say the main villain of this story. I mean, it's called The Mark of the Rani, talking about the mark that the people are getting. So I guess she's kind of the main villain, but the Master is also here. We see the Master and we know about the Master before we know about the Rani, and ultimately I'm still a little bit confused as to what the Master's plan is here. I mean, the Rani's makes a little bit more sense, but the Master's just kind of, I don't know, once he finds the Rani, figures out what she's doing, and then works out that the Doctor's here, his plan just seems to be to get rid of the Doctor. I don't really see what else his plans are. Like, it just doesn't really make much sense to me. Maybe I'm missing something, but personally, the Master's motive in this just seems to be, I want to kill the Doctor. That seems to be about it. But yeah, he tries to team up with the Rani. In the end, they kind of do, although the Rani, you know, although she's a rogue Time Lord and she doesn't like the Doctor either, she also doesn't like the Master because, you know, she says that he's stupid, you know. You keep getting defeated by the Doctor, how do you never understand, you know, you never kind of learn anything from the Doctor defeating you. So I like that concept of it, but yeah, I think I can definitely say that I prefer the Rani to the Master in this one. I think the Master is just kind of chucked in there and doesn't feel 100% necessary. So I've also got here Introduction to the Rani, another Time Lord exiled from Gallifrey. We've already kind of talked about that. Very similar sort of thing to the Master. You know, she's been kicked off Gallifrey, and yeah, she's just another rogue Time Lord. Not really much else to say about that we haven't already said. How does the Doctor know the Rani's men won't try to kill him or Perry? Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe he just knows what the Rani's like and knows what, you know, because obviously he knows the Rani. He sees her and instantly knows her. So that tells me that maybe she hasn't regenerated. She did mention something about how she can just change whenever she wants or something. So I'm not sure what all that was about. But yeah, she basically tells, excuse me, she basically tells Perry, not Perry, no, she tells one of her men, I think he's called Josh, to if the Doctor tries to escape or whatever, or tries to move, to kill the guy that's next to the Doctor laid down, kind of being operated on, scientifically, you know, worked on. But then Perry comes in and, yeah, basically manages to do something, and then it doesn't, I don't know, the whole thing just seems a little bit like, oh, we don't know how to get out of the situation, so we're just going to make it that these people that are being controlled by the Rani just have no thought other than exactly what they've been told, which I guess kind of makes sense, but I don't know, it didn't really sit right with me. It felt like a little bit too easy to get out of that situation to me. The TARDIS gets pushed into the mine shaft. I think that's a pretty cool little scene there, you know, the TARDIS falling into the mine shaft. I still have questions about how people managed to pick up the TARDIS and move it around, considering it's a literal never-ending almost spaceship, although I guess bigger on the inside, the whole weight thing as well, maybe you know, when it's just a box, it doesn't weigh as much. So it happens so often in the new series and in the classic series that I've kind of put that behind me now. I used to complain about it quite a lot, and it's still in the back of my mind that people could just, you know, you can get like 20 people and they can pick up the TARDIS. But I'm just kind of under the influence now, under the thoughts now that it is just a lot lighter than it actually relatively would be, so that's why that happens. So I'm fine with that now. But yeah, it getting pushed into the mineshaft's interesting. The cliffhanger of the Doctor about to fall into the mineshaft is also quite a interesting, quite an interesting cliffhanger. The Doctor gasses himself and Perry and somewhat knew it was going to happen, you know, when he's in the Rani's lair, and he, you know, he's like, oh, this painting here, and there's like some bit of like string on the wall, and I mean, he obviously knew that something bad was gonna happen, I would have thought. And yeah, it gasses the room. He has to put a gas mask on, him and Perry. It felt a little bit like he should have been a bit more cautious when pulling a random piece of string in this somewhat evil woman's lair. Maybe be a bit more careful, I don't know. The Rani's TARDIS looks pretty cool. I actually really like the look of her TARDIS. She's got all these like dinosaur, well, literal dinosaurs in like glass little tube things everywhere that they did explain it, something about she went back in time to get something. I don't know if it's got something to do with the maggots that she had or something, I'm not sure. But yeah, just the general look of her TARDIS and the console, the way that like spins around, I think that's really cool. I really like the look of that. What else have I got on here? Luke, who was a kind of friend, a companion, I guess, to Stevenson, one of the other main characters in this story, he was turned into a tree behind the Rani's trap. That was an interesting thing. She puts all these traps down with the Master. I think it's mainly to try and trap the Doctor, but ends up, yeah, getting Luke, who she also pretty much controlled as well, and he literally turns into a tree. So I don't really know what she was going for there with all that, but she wanted to turn the Doctor into a tree? I don't really know, but it was interesting for sure. The Doctor defeats the Master and the Rani by messing with her TARDIS so they can't return. Now, I didn't love this ending, because yes, he tricked them to going into the TARDIS, they took off, and when he was in the TARDIS, he messed around with it and basically said something about, oh, they'll get all the way to the end of the universe before they can fix it and come back. It's like, alright, so they will be able to come back then. Yes, you've prolonged what's going to happen, you've prolonged them from coming back and causing more chaos, but you haven't stopped them. You've just kind of sent them away for a little while, and they will come back. And they're in a time machine, remember? So they could come back very quickly, or they could just go somewhere completely different and cause just as much mayhem. I'm not loving that ending. It felt like a little bit of I don't really know what we're going to do here. We'll just kind of shoot them away and pretend that we've kind of got rid of them, but realistically we kind of haven't. So I didn't love that. But then finally, a fairly uneventful and at times boring episode, but in my opinion, quite... I mean, it's 2 parts long, but Colin Baker's era is mostly, or at least for season 22, they're all kind of 2-parters, or I think there might be the occasional 3-parter, but they're kind of like 40-odd, 42-minute episodes, kind of more like the new series, actually. So it is kind of like a classic 4-parter in a way, maybe a little bit shorter, but yeah, it's decent. It does drag quite a lot. It is quite slow. There are moments that are quicker paced and more exciting, but it is quite slow on the most part, and there isn't a whole lot going on, a whole lot of excitement, but it's kind of, it's fairly, what's the word, it doesn't really, I don't know what the word is, but harmless. It's fairly harmless as an episode because it's not bad story-wise, it's just a bit boring. So because of that, I'm going to give The Mark of the Rani a 6 out of 10. I was debating going like a 5 or a 5.5, but ultimately I don't think it is actually bad. I think the story is fine. I like the fact that we've got 2 rogue Time Lords here, although I do think that the Master is a little bit kind of shoehorned in. It is cool to see these 2, and the Doctor go face to face, and the Rani and the Master having their little niggles with each other as well is cool. Most of the characters that we see a decent amount of in this episode, like Stevenson and a couple of others, are fairly well acted and relatively well written. And yeah, the general plot is fine, but nothing amazing, but it is let down quite a bit by just being a bit too slow and a bit boring and uneventful throughout the most of it. But yeah, a 6 out of 10 for the Mark of the Rani. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.